At my mother's funeral, my father didn't shed a single tear. He stood beside her coffin with his mistress, a woman half his age, wearing the diamonds that used to belong to my mom. Then, in front of everyone, he did something no one could believe. He handed her a leather folder, the deed to our $3 billion ranch. Gasps filled the room. Cameras flashed. My knees nearly gave out. But I smiled. He thought I'd be too broken to fight, that grief would silence me. But grief doesn't silence the strong. It sharpens them. And mine remembered every word my mother ever said, every secret she whispered before she died. He believed one signature could erase her legacy. He was wrong, because when you hand a thief your fortune at a funeral, the only thing left to bury is your own name. That day, I decided to show my father who the real heir truly was. The ranch was draped in white lilies, my mother's favorite. Their scent hung thick in the warm Texas air. Reporters waited behind the fence, pretending they weren't there for scandal. But they didn't have to wait long. When I stepped beside the casket, my father, Richard Carter, wasn't looking at my mother's photo. He was looking at her. Vanessa Moore, 26, perfectly polished. Her morning dress looked more fit for a red carpet than a graveyard. "Your mother wanted peace," my father said, voice cold as stone. "I'm sure she didn't mean this kind of peace," I whispered. Then he called for silence. The guest turned. He opened a slim briefcase, pulled out a brown leather folder, and handed it to Vanessa with a smile that made my stomach twist. "I want to honor Margaret," he said, "by giving Vanessa what she helped me preserve, the Carter Ranch." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. My breath caught. That ranch wasn't his to give. It was my mother's legacy, built from her family's inheritance. Vanessa placed a hand on her heart. "Richard, I don't know what to say." "Oh, I do," I said, my voice slicing through the murmurs like glass. "You could start with, 'Thank you for stealing from the dead.'" Her smile froze. My father's jaw clenched. "Olivia not here," he hissed. "No, exactly here," I snapped back. "You think Mom can't hear this? You think this circus honors her?" Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Then Vanessa leaned in, her voice a venomous whisper. "Careful, sweetheart. You don't want to make enemies before you inherit nothing." I laughed softly. "You've already inherited my father's lies. Let's see how long you can keep them." When the ceremony ended, the priest urged everyone toward the gravesite. As they lowered my mother's coffin into the earth, I watched my father wrap his arm around Vanessa's waist. He didn't look once at the casket. The cameras did. He loved that. And as the first shovel of dirt hit the lid, something inside me shifted. Not grief, resolve. I could almost hear my mother's voice. "Silence is power, Olivia. Don't speak until you're ready to win." So I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled for the cameras, just like Vanessa. Except mine wasn't the smile of a woman pretending to mourn. It was the smile of someone who already knew her next move. Because that ranch, it wasn't my father's to give. And before long, the world would know it too. When the guests left and the flowers began to wilt, I drove back to the ranch alone. The long dirt road shimmered in the heat, stretching across land my mother's family had owned for nearly a century. Every fence post, every weathered barn beam. Her fingerprints were everywhere. Inside the house, the silence was thick. My father and Vanessa had already moved into the master suite. Their luggage sat stacked in the hallway, like a declaration of war. I ignored it and walked straight to my mother's study, the one room my father never dared enter. It still smelled of lavender and ink. Her desk was immaculate, except for one thing. A sealed envelope with my name written in her familiar cursive. My hands trembled as I broke the wax seal. "If you're reading this," she wrote, "then I'm gone, and your father has done exactly what I feared. But remember, Olivia, this land remembers who built it. The papers say Carter, but the soil says Hamilton. The truth is hidden where he'll never look, where work, not vanity, leaves its mark." I read the line 3 times before it hit me. She meant the old stables, the one she renovated herself years ago. I drove there as the sun dipped low, painting the valley gold and pink. The heavy wooden doors creaked open. Dust danced in the fading light. I found her corner, the one she used to sit in while sketching new paddock layouts. Under a loose floorboard, something glinted. A small metal box. Inside, a USB drive, a folded letter, and a trust document. Hamilton Family Holdings. My mother had transferred 70% of the ranch into a private trust, naming herself sole trustee and me as successor. Not my father, not Vanessa. Every document, every clause, every deed bore her signature, and not one required his consent. He'd never noticed. He'd never cared to. When I closed the laptop, I looked out across the fields. The wind rustled through the tall grass like a whisper, and I smiled again, this time for real, because my father might have buried my mother that day, but he'd also buried his own empire. And I was about to dig it back up, one secret at a time. He thought he owned this land because he paid the bills, but ownership isn't money, it's memory. And my mother, she buried her legacy deep enough that no amount of greed could ever dig it up. I whispered into the fading twilight. You were always 3 steps ahead, weren't you, Mom? For the first time that day, I smiled. Not the kind that hides pain, the kind that sees victory forming on the horizon. Because the moment my father handed that ranch to his mistress, he didn't just betray my mother's memory. He triggered the very clause that would return everything to me. 2 days after the funeral, the ranch looked like a crime scene dressed for a magazine cover. Vanessa wasted no time. The front gates now gleamed with gold letters reading, "The Carter Estate, a New Era." I parked at the edge of the drive and watched as luxury cars rolled in. Photographers, socialites, even a few journalists my father used to call leeches. Now they were his guests. And there she was, Vanessa, standing on the grand staircase, champagne in hand, smiling the way only someone blind to guilt can smile. My father hovered beside her, hand on her back, pretending the world hadn't just seen him disgrace my mother's memory. I should have turned around, but something, maybe defiance, maybe duty, pulled me forward. When I stepped inside, the music faltered. Eyes turned. Someone whispered, "That's his daughter." Vanessa's smile stiffened, but she didn't miss a beat. "Olivia, how wonderful you could join us," she said, voice dripping with performance. "I know how much this place means to your family." Your family? The words tasted like poison. "I wasn't aware we were celebrating," I said evenly, scanning the glittering room. Did I miss the part where my mother's name got removed from the foundation stone? Her eyes flashed. "Oh, that old engraving? We're updating the branding. Modernization, you know." I walked past her, my heels echoing on the marble, stopped at the wall where my mother's portrait once hung. Now, there was a massive gold-trimmed mirror. My reflection stared back. Tired eyes, black dress, jaw tight. "That painting belonged here," I murmured. Vanessa tilted her head, smug. "Things change, darling." "Yes," I said, turning slowly toward her. "But history doesn't. And this ranch has a long memory." The silence was thick. A few guests drifted toward the buffet, pretending not to listen. My father finally stepped in, his voice sharp and shaking. "Olivia, enough. This isn't the time." I smiled softly. "You're right. It's not the time for me. It's the time for you, to enjoy your new empire while it still feels real." I started toward the door but paused beside Vanessa, close enough to smell her perfume. "Just one piece of advice," I whispered. "When you live in someone else's house, don't get too comfortable rearranging the ghosts." Her smile faltered. "Excuse me. You'll understand soon enough." I walked out into the night. The laughter behind me sounded hollow and nervous. Above, storm clouds gathered, bruised purple against the hills. I could smell the rain coming, sharp, electric, inevitable. As thunder rolled, I looked back once at the glowing windows of the ranch my mother built. Vanessa thought she'd won. My father thought he'd buried my mother's legacy. But storms don't destroy what's rooted deep. They reveal what's been buried too long. And by morning, the reckoning would begin. The next morning, the sky hung low and gray, like it knew what was coming. I hadn't slept. My mind replayed my father's smug face, Vanessa's hollow smile, and my mother's voice whispering, "You'll know when to fight." So I drove straight to Dallas, to the law firm that handled my mother's estate. The receptionist looked up instantly. "Miss Carter, Miss Blake has been expecting you. Eleanor Blake, my mother's attorney for over 20 years, greeted me with kind eyes and quiet strength. You look just like her, she said softly. And I assume this isn't just a visit for nostalgia. I handed her the USB and the trust papers I'd found hidden in the stables. She left this, said you know what to do. Eleanor adjusted her glasses, reading through the documents. Her expression shifted from curiosity to shock, then awe. Good Lord, she whispered. She really did it. Did what? I asked. Your mother created a conditional trust. 6 months before she passed, she restructured ownership. 70% of the ranch is in your name. But there's a clause, automatic and ironclad. If your father ever tries to transfer ownership or gift the property for personal reasons, the entire estate reverts to you. I blinked, barely breathing. You're saying? Eleanor nodded with a small, knowing smile. I'm saying, by giving that ranch to his mistress, your father just signed away his rights. Shock and satisfaction flooded through me. My father's arrogance had buried him, not my mother. But Eleanor wasn't done. There's more. She opened a drawer and pulled out a small flash drive. The label read, For my daughter, when he betrays us. My throat tightened. Can I? Not yet, Eleanor said gently. We'll need to present it officially. The trust activates through probate court. She smiled faintly, resolute. We'll file the claim quietly, Olivia. And when the dust settles, this land will be yours again, exactly as your mother intended. Let him think he's still in control, Eleanor had said. I exhaled slowly, her words sinking in like a quiet prophecy. He has no idea, does he? She smiled faintly. Men like your father rarely do. They mistake ownership for power. But your mother, she built something deeper, something he'll never touch. When I stepped outside, rain had started to fall, cold, steady, cleansing. I stood beneath it, letting it soak through my coat, each drop washing away the helplessness I'd carried since the funeral. Back at the ranch, workers were unloading crates of designer furniture, Vanessa's vision for her new kingdom. She stood on the porch, sugar in her smile, venom in her eyes. Hope you're settling in, I called out. It's not every day someone decorates a house they don't own. She laughed lightly. Oh, sweetie, I think you're mistaken. But her eyes flickered, just for a moment. By the time I reached my truck, Eleanor's voice echoed through my mind. He's already lost it all. He just doesn't know yet. By Friday, the rumors were wildfire. Some said my father was marrying Vanessa within the month. Others whispered he was selling pieces of the ranch to foreign investors. I didn't bother correcting any of it. Let the noise grow louder, so my silence could strike sharper. I parked outside Carter Holdings, the empire my father built from steel and ego. Through the mirror glass, I could see his reflection, confident, untouchable, hollow. Not for long. Inside, his assistant barely looked up. He's in a meeting. Not anymore, I said, pushing through the double doors. My father stood by the window, phone in hand. Vanessa sat on his desk, scrolling through her tablet, her heels tapping against the mahogany like a countdown. Olivia, he sighed. You can't keep making scenes every time you don't get what you want. Funny, I said. That's exactly what I was going to tell you. Vanessa smirked. Shouldn't you still be grieving, dear? I am, I replied flatly. Just not for who you think. He turned then, his voice sharp. What do you want? The truth. I stepped closer, pulling a folded document from my coat. Did you even read Mom's trust before you started playing Santa Claus at her funeral? He stiffened. Don't talk to me about that paperwork. It's irrelevant. Is it? I dropped the trust on his desk. Because you just violated Clause 7. No property transfers for personal affection or gain. The moment you handed her the deed, you surrendered everything. Vanessa's smirk cracked. That's absurd. Ask your lawyers, I said. My father's face went pale, the mask of power slipping. You don't understand the implications. Oh, I do, I said. You lost the moment you tried to erase Mom. The court will just make it official. The silence that followed was suffocating. Vanessa grabbed her purse, hissing. You think a few old papers make you powerful? The world belongs to those who take. I smiled faintly. Then you'll hate what comes next. Because I'm taking it all back. My father's voice broke behind me as I walked away. Olivia, don't do this. I didn't look back. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of a coming storm. The first drops hit my face as I climbed into my truck. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. He thought I was playing defense. He still didn't understand. I was starting the war. The storm hit that night, hard and merciless. Rain battered against the ranch windows like nature itself wanted front row seats. I didn't sleep. Every flash of lightning reminded me of Mom's voice. Silence is power. Speak only when the truth can't be ignored. By morning, the sky was deceptively calm. At the courthouse, I wore my mother's black suit, simple, strong. Vanessa arrived in white, the color of denial, hanging on my father's arm as if charm could rewrite law. Cameras flashed. She smiled for everyone. Inside, the air was electric. My father's lawyer looked exhausted, flipping through papers that already felt meaningless. When the clerk called Carter versus Carter, the room fell silent. Judge Peterson adjusted his glasses. Proceed. Eleanor stood beside me, steady, composed. Your Honor, she began, this is not a dispute over ownership. It is the lawful execution of a trust created by Margaret Hamilton Carter 6 months before her death. She handed the clerk a sealed flash drive. Exhibit A. The lights dimmed. My mother appeared on the screen, alive, radiant, fierce. My breath hitched. If you're watching this, she began, then Richard has made the mistake I feared most, trading legacy for ego. This ranch was born from Hamilton blood, built with Hamilton hands. If my husband gives away what he never built, my daughter Olivia becomes sole heir, legally, morally, and spiritually. The room was silent except for her voice, warm and unshakable. Vanessa shifted uneasily. Her diamond bracelet jingled like a warning bell. And to my daughter, Mom continued softly, protect what's real. Don't fight with anger. Win with truth. The video ended. The silence was heavy, final. Judge Peterson cleared his throat. Mrs. Blake, do you have proof the defendant transferred the property? Eleanor nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Public footage from Mrs. Carter's funeral, showing Mr. Carter gifting the deed to Miss Vanessa Moore. The screen flickered again, showing that moment burned into my memory. My father handing over the leather folder, cameras flashing, Vanessa smiling through fake tears. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Reporters typed furiously. My father's attorney lowered his head. And just like that, the empire he built on arrogance collapsed beneath the weight of one woman's truth. Your Honor, Eleanor's voice rang clear through the courtroom. According to the Carter Trust, legal ownership of the Hamilton Carter Ranch transfers to Olivia Carter, effective immediately. The judge didn't hesitate. His pen met the paper with one heavy stroke, the sound slicing through the air like thunder. Just like that, the empire shifted hands. Vanessa shot to her feet. This can't be happening. That's my home. I stood slowly, meeting her shaking glare. No, I said quietly. It was never yours. You can't lose what was never meant to belong to you. She sneered, eyes burning. You think this makes you powerful? It doesn't, I replied. It makes me my mother's daughter. Then came the voice I'd spent my life craving, my father's. Olivia, please, he rasped. We can fix this. I looked at him. The man who'd once carried the world in his stride now looked smaller, hollowed by greed and guilt. You can't fix what you tried to bury, Dad. The bailiff handed me the ownership papers. This time, my hands didn't tremble. Outside, the clouds broke open, sunlight spilling across the courthouse steps. Reporters surged forward, microphones flashing like lightning. I said only one thing before walking away. Legacy doesn't belong to those who take it. It belongs to those who remember. And in that moment, I didn't just reclaim the ranch. I reclaimed her name, her strength, and every piece of myself my father thought he could sign away. By the time the ruling hit the news, the Carter empire was crumbling. Investors fled. Partners demanded answers. The same anchors who once called my father Texas royalty now called him the man who lost a $3 billion ranch to his own daughter. I didn't celebrate. I just watched from my mother's old study, the one place where she dreamed of the future. Now, I was the one holding the pen. Vanessa was the first to disappear. She packed her life in silence and slipped out before dawn, leaving behind debts, perfume, and shame. The mistress who became the face of humiliation. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt something softer, pity. The kind reserved for people who confuse greed with love. My father stayed. Maybe pride chained him there. Or maybe guilt did. When I returned that weekend, his car sat beneath the old oak my mother planted on their wedding day. I found him in the stables, staring at the horses. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened, his eyes red. "You came to gloat?" he asked. "No," I said. "I came to see what's left of you." He laughed bitterly. "What's left? My name's Mud. My daughter hates me." "I don't hate you," I replied. "Hate takes up space in my heart. You're just history." He looked up then, voice cracking. "I made mistakes, Olivia, but I built this legacy." I shook my head. "You built walls. Mom built the legacy. And when she realized you'd trade it for vanity, she protected it." He winced. "You sound just like her." "I hope so." For a long moment, the only sound was the quiet breath of the horses. "Do you know what it feels like," he said finally, "to realize your daughter's smarter than you ever gave her credit for?" "Yes," I said softly. "It feels like justice." He looked away first. "What will you do now?" "Rebuild. Rebrand. Turn this land into something worthy of her name." He nodded slowly. "Then I guess it's yours now." "No," I said, walking away. "It always was." That night, I signed the transfer. Carter Holdings became the Hamilton Foundation for Environmental Renewal, a sanctuary for wildlife and therapy programs. The empire my father once ruled, now, carried my mother's maiden name. They called it poetic justice. I called it balance. The king had fallen. The crown had come home. And for the first time in years, the ranch breathed again. 6 months later, the land didn't look like a battlefield anymore. It looked like peace. Spring painted the hills in wildflowers, new life growing where pain once lived. The gate still said Carter Ranch, but below it hung a new sign in wrought iron. Margaret's Meadow, a place for renewal. Each morning I rose before dawn, brewed coffee in my mother's chipped mug, and walked out to the stables. The horses would nicker softly when they heard me coming, calm, steady, alive. Elena, the new operations manager, joined me, clipboard in hand. "Therapy group arrives at 9, she said. "Vet checks at noon. Donations tripled this month." I smiled. Mom would be proud. "Proud?" Elena said, smiling back. She'd be amazed. The house didn't echo anymore. My mother's portrait now hung at the center of the hall, restored, radiant, and home again. Where Vanessa's mirror once stood, I'd hung an old photo. Mom laughing on horseback, her hair wild in the wind. Around noon, a black sedan stopped at the gate. My father stepped out. Thinner now, older, softer. He'd been living quietly in a nearby town since the scandal, stripped of power but not humanity. I met him halfway. "You look just like her," he said. "Every day a little more." "I know," I whispered. He handed me a letter, trembling. "I wrote this a dozen times. You don't have to read it. I just needed to try." I didn't open it. Some things are better said out loud. He nodded. "I was wrong, Olivia. About love. About legacy. I thought control was power. But legacy isn't control. It's what survives when control is gone." I glanced toward the children brushing horses in the pasture. "She taught me that," I said softly. "And I think you just learned it." He smiled, small and sad. "I guess I did." He turned to leave, but I called after him. "Dad." He stopped. "I forgive you, but that doesn't mean you get to come back." He nodded once. "I know." And then he walked away, slow and quiet, until his car vanished down the gravel road. That evening, I stood by the fence, watching the sunset bleed gold across the fields. The land stretched endless, ours again. Free of lies, full of memory. I whispered into the wind. "It's done, Mom. He can't hurt this place anymore." The horses stirred. The air smelled of wild sage. And for the first time in years, I felt still, not in victory, but in peace. Because revenge had ended. Justice had spoken. And peace, quiet, gentle, undeniable peace, had finally come home.